was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Welcome to Peace with Penny Season 4. We're so glad that you've decided to join us. My life has changed in so many ways since our family's 2014 trip to Israel. I began to write and develop my website, www.pennyst.com, wrote my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel, became a speaker, and now I'm the founder of Peace with Penny. And I have the privilege of speaking to amazing people who work on peace, mostly between Israelis and Palestinians. I definitely say that I was blasted from complacency. I want the world to know that Israelis and Palestinians do want peace, even though that's not what they are shown on the news channels. It was Jean Houston's idea that I develop Peace with Penny. Jean is a world-renowned dignitary who has counseled nations' presidents, public figures, celebrities, and the United Nations. Her suggestion to create Peace with Penny has been a great gift. For me, I work daily on what I love and care about, peace. And the world needs to know about these angels on earth who work together so that their children someday can play safely in their backyards. Peace is hard work. You must be willing to listen respectfully and remain open to further discussion, even if what you're hearing is in opposition to what you've experienced or believe. You look for commonality and work for mutually shared desires. So let's get started. Peace with Penny is opening Season 4 with the first episodes discussing a terrific peace organization called Hands of Peace. Hands of Peace has been working with Israeli, Palestinian, and American youth for 20 years. Peace with Penny will be interviewing first-year participants, alumni, delegation chaperones, host families, board members, and staff for the broadcast. Hands of Peace is an interfaith organization where Jews, Muslims, and Christians participate together. During the camp, the teens attend services at a church, synagogue, and a mosque, and will also speak to the pastor of the church they attended. Hands of Peace hosts youth that are Jewish Israelis and Palestinian citizens of Israel, Palestinians from the West Bank, and Americans. We'll also learn about the extensive reimagining process that Hands of Peace went through to make plans for their future development. They have begun implementing the plan for the first time this year. To begin, let's hear from Gretchen Grad, founder of Hands of Peace, about how and why she started the peace organization 20 years ago.
Since the founding of Hands of Peace on the shores of Lake Michigan, stretching from the coast of the Mediterranean Sea to the banks of the Jordan River to the sandy California beaches, Gretchen Grad has been planting peace for 20 years.
How did Hands of Peace begin? It was not something that was planned. It was fairly spontaneous. It came out of the wake of September 11, 2001. It really was a middle-of-the-night epiphany idea. It just showed up fully formed to bring Israeli, Palestinian, and American teenagers together for dialogue, for connection. I sat with the idea for 48 hours, waiting for it to go away, and I said the idea out loud, and it received a lot of criticism, but there were just enough people who showed up and said, oh yeah, we've got to do that. Once the wheels started turning, they started turning faster and faster. I was recruiting host families. I was trying to raise money. Who's going to get the t-shirts? What do they eat? Who's going to donate lunches? Can we get someone to donate a school bus? It was mostly the nitty-gritty logistics at that point. There's a gravitational pull to Hands of Peace, and I see it in people who are drawn to the mission and who give so selflessly to keep it going. You know, once you're in, you're in. Because we are an in-person, program, that's what we do. We bring people together face to face. And yet, here we are 2 years later, I think even stronger as an organization than we were going into COVID. All thanks to our staff and our board who have just ended a deep dive into a reimagining of how we could be a better organization. And lo and behold, here we are. We are raring to go. Hands of Peace has evolved in a number of ways. But in a lot of ways, at its core, we're still doing what we set out to do that very first year with the red t-shirts. We are bringing together young people who are hungry to learn about others and the world and who want to have the skills to figure out how to raise their voice in the world. How do you measure success? It's a great question. If you're an organization that says you're for fostering peace and you're specifically focusing on Israelis and Palestinians, it would be fair to say, the conflict doesn't seem like it's been solved in the last 20 years. In fact, if anything, it seems worse, and I would not disagree with that. I think we need to use a different metric. How are we impacting the people who go through the program, and what do they do with that experience? We have more than 700 alumni, and they are now scattered around the world, incorporating the lessons that they learned, the experiences they had at Hands of Peace in ways big and small. Peacemaking is an overwhelming challenge and concept, but each person contributes to getting closer and closer to that goal. 20 years, wow, it's almost a generation. When I see the incredible people that I get to call friends and that I feel connected to, and issues that I am aware of and want to be involved in. It's like Dorothy stepping into Oz, like your world goes from black and white to color. It's like, wow, I could never have imagined this would be where my life was taking me, but thank God it did. It's amazing.
Come learn about their dialogue sessions, rope course adventures, cultural night, and creative projects in San Diego. They even take a trip to the United States and Mexico border. What similarities and differences can be drawn between that experience and the borders between Israel and the West Bank? Host families often adopt their wards forevermore into their family.
When the bus came into the church, I was freaking shaking.
I didn't really want to open my heart to people that I don't know.
I didn't know whether I should shake their hand or hug them.
Now this is real. This is it.
Before I came here, I didn't have ever had a conversation or interaction with any Palestinians or Americans neither.
Everyone just like puts it in your mind that these are your enemies. But then as soon as I met them, I thought like it's not their fault as it's not ours.
We are 17-year-olds. We don't have the skills or the expertise to solve a 70-year-old conflict, but we can practice skills to at least develop relationships with one another and start the first step.
Peace can't happen without having the first interaction with the other side and with each other.
Dialogue was the most precious journey out of the whole program.
So first there needs to be the development of trust, because you're telling like really personal and intimate stories.
You may get nervous, you may get angry, and sometimes it will be emotional. You might start crying. In the dialogues, now I feel it's the most safe place that I could have ever find in my life.
When you grow up in an environment that all you learn is your side and your troubles or your successes, hearing something from the other side is A, really surprising, but B, it opens your mind.
I found out that we're kind of on the same page, the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I mean, of course we fought about stuff and we argued about stuff, but then at the end we find like common ground together.
In our climate in America today, there's not a whole lot of talking going on. There's a lot of shouting and tribalism. And I think Hands of Peace really teaches that dialogue is essential to fully get a circular view of any issue, not just the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Hands of Peace has taught me the power of listening and not always trying to interject your own opinions.
The Hands of Peace made me more open-minded and more loving to all the people from all the nations. I now see human as a human, not as a Palestinian or Jewish or American.
If all teenagers unite and we like spread what we know to the others and to the world, I think it might like affect the government in a way that even young people want to make a change.
Step by step, I just built me.
By ourselves, we learn that we're leaders, and it's something that we won't learn in any high school or any school. And that's absolutely amazing, and Hands of Peace gave it to me.
In part one, we'll be speaking with two Hands of Peace board members, Kim Landy and Robert Gelb, who are also host family parents. So let's begin by introducing them. Kim Landy is a board member for Hands of Peace and a marketing and strategic planning professional whose involvement in peace building started with her two daughters' involvement in the organization. Both daughters are Hands of Peace alumni, and their family has hosted 7 young women from Israel, Palestine, and Brooklyn during the Hands of Peace summer program. Kim served as co-chair of the Hands of Peace reimagining process. Through that year-long strategic initiative, Hands of Peace reoriented its programs to a dialogue, education, action model to empower youth as leaders. Besides raising 2 daughters, she is married to Scott, and another area where she applies her creativity to is as an artist, and she guides intentional creativity workshops utilizing art making to find peace from the inside out. Amen. Robert Gelb, who likes to be called Rob, is both a board member of Hands of Peace, and has participated as a host family. In his professional career, he is an orthopedic surgeon and specializes in hand surgery for over 40 years. He is board certified by the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery and the National Board of Medical Examiners as a licensed medical examiner. Well, Rob, coincidentally, the teens participating in Hands of Peace are called Hands. Did that have anything to do with your attraction to helping with the program?
No, but it didn't hurt.
How would you describe Hands of Peace?
Hands of Peace is an organization that the sum of its parts are a group of a community taking young people who are vibrant and intellectually stimulated and putting them in an environment where they are faced with people of very differing opinions and people who have different stereotypes, and for the first time learning to interact and learning to hear and have a dialogue with people who have different points of view and be able to digest it and integrate it into their lives and use it and become young leaders to bring about a positive peace. That is peace which will continue in the future and make change to bring the world to a better place. To try to look at ways that we can give them skills to take back with them to their communities, to utilize in their real lives and make the changes that they need. And, you know, there are now about 750 alumni of the program.
Yeah.
Who have gone on to become professionals and physicians and lawyers and other aspects of and other professions. And they have said that this is one of the greatest influences that ever happened to them, and that they utilize the skills that they learned in this short period of time in their lives presently.
Yeah, I'm going to have the honor to interview some alumni.
But one of the things that's really amazing to me is that the kids, when they speak to each other and tell their stories, they get a certain sense of validation that what they feel is worthwhile and that it's their narrative and it's not right or wrong. And they're able to listen and hear another narrative and integrate that into their lives and see a commonality and a affinity for someone else is not very much different than they are and has the same desires and aspirations in life, which is very enlightening to everybody.
Great. Yeah, it's always amazed me how Israelis and Palestinians live right next to each other, but they don't socialize. It's amazing how just being able to speak to one another, the impact it has, and it really proves to them that they're raised with all of these assumptions about one another, and even at times told that, for instance, some Palestinians are raised that even in their textbooks that Jews aren't human. So it's a shock. Kim, can you talk a little bit about how it started with 9/11 and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Sure. Hands of Peace was started by Gretchen Grad just after 9/11, and she really felt this calling to bring young people together from the Israeli and Palestinian sides to come to Chicago. This was 20 years ago. To have a dialogue and peace building program. And whatever happened, there was some magic there. They pulled together a group of young people and they pulled together host families to host these young people in this Chicago community of Glenview. And they built a dialogue program. And that program has been continuing.
What made you want to work on peace?
So honestly, it was right place at the right time, I would say. I've always had a real interest in this, but it was my children and seeing the experience of Sophie and Rebecca that really drove me to become more and more involved, because my heart was so open during that summer program, that first summer program. I just felt like I had butterflies all the time. Like there was something that I was working in, something that was so much bigger than myself. And it was for the good of humanity. And I realized that this was something that I needed to put more time into. And gradually I've become more and more and more involved with peace building.
Boy, do I know that feeling. I thought it would be fun to discuss some specific programs which will include fun activities like cultural night and host family days, as well as the extremely educational trip to the Mexican border. We'll also talk about the very important host family interactions that are key to running the program and personal development for the participants as well as the families. Kim Landy will also discuss the reimagining program that she led to lead Hands of Peace into their future development. What types of activities do the teens participate in during the 3 weeks that they're here?
The program of Hands of Peace is really focused on dialogue. And we have professional facilitators, Israeli and Palestinian facilitators, who come and lead dialogue for 2.5 to 3 hours per day during the program. And that dialogue is really the foundation of the program. And then in the afternoons, they connect as teenagers. They do arts programs. They learn how to do storytelling. They play games. They connect. They start to realize that the other is really not the other, that they can, that person who has been my enemy, that I learned growing up was my enemy, that person likes soccer, I like soccer, we have a connection, we're really, truly human. And those walls start to come down, and the organization, the people around the organization start to realize that they have a place in raising their voice as peace builders, because they are able to experience all of these different activities together over a period of 19 days. And so by the time that bus rolls away, they're clinging to each other and crying because they've had such an amazing experience together.
How did you see your own children grow due to their participation in the Hands of Peace?
Well, as you know, each child is different. And we had 4 consecutive years of Hands of Peace, 2 with my daughter Sophie and 2 with my daughter Rebecca. And Sophie and Rebecca are very different people. And for Sophie, she started off being very quiet in the dialogue and really taking in what this meant. She felt like she didn't have a part in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and therefore she couldn't actually speak up. And that was about 2/3 of the way through the program. She had a really wonderful host sister. Her name is Sadah, and she is Druze. And Sadah sat down with Sophie and said, I know you have some things to say about this program. I know that you have a lot of really good thoughts in your head. I watch you and I can tell in dialogue that you have some things to say. And they sat and talked for hours about the conflict in the room with the door shut. And after that long, long conversation, Sophie found her voice. And she started speaking in that dialogue in a way. She had a very interesting perspective, and a perspective that the people in the youth in that group really wanted to hear. And once she did, I really do think it profoundly changed her. I think it changed her to be able to raise her voice in many different situations. And my daughter Rebecca is a theater kid, already very comfortable speaking her mind and her truth. And for her, it just made her realize how important it is to really listen, and how important it is to see the other. And with both of them, I saw such profound changes in them. And sort of as a mom, of course, you're going along with them. You're just being carried along with their experience. And I felt such a profound connection to what they were going through, and so grateful that I could do that. Did I answer that right?
It was beautiful. Actually, I have tears in my eyes. So,
okay.
As a parent, how could you want anything more. I mean, for your kids to learn such profound lessons and to help them grow. I mean, it's beautiful. The space where they hold dialogue is very well protected. I know I certainly wanted to be a fly on the wall, but I was not allowed to be that. And outside participation you're not allowed, and meaning that no other people other than the teens and the facilitators are allowed to observe, as I understand it. And can you talk about why that's so important with the teens?
The dialogue that Hands of Peace does is over a period of 19 days. And it is a process that is truly, it goes through many different levels of change. And it starts with trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that trust is built by feeling like that you have an incredibly safe space where you can say anything and you will be heard. And it doesn't mean that everyone is going to agree with you in the room.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that what you say isn't going to cause a reaction and they might get really mad.
Mm-hmm.
But that trust building only comes because you know that you are in a safe space that will not be shared with anyone else in the room. And that is why Hands of Peace is the dialogue process is so sacred. And as you can imagine, when you go through a dialogue over these 19 days, the dialogue changes and shifts and grows. And it starts off with the process of really, usually the youth just being able to come because they want to say what they want to say that's on their mind.
Okay, so there's two different groups, but basically it's a group of kids, not one-on-one.
Right. It's a group of kids.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know that I even fully answered your question, that why it's such a sacred space.
Be my guest.
Okay. So you start with trust and trust building and developing norms. And those norms are that nothing within that dialogue space goes out of that dialogue space. And that you have respect for the other side, that you are willing to stop and listen one person at a time, kind of conversations. And then beyond that, there is a process that takes place over those 19 days. And that process really is a growth process for them to realize that they not only have something to say, but they have something to hear. And that there is a way that they can perhaps see that the other side or the other has commonalities. They start to see what they have in common, and the walls that they may have had because of what society has given them as their title, Palestinian, Israeli, American. Those walls melt away, and they start to realize that they're human, that they have that they have so much in common, and so much more in common than they do differences. And that's the value of dialogue over this process of 19 days.
Yeah, I've noted that in all the peace organizations I speak to, certainly listening becomes at least as important as being able to talk. And also, it's really sad that it takes this for all of us to realize we're all human. You know, the communities, particularly, we're talking a lot about the Israeli and Palestinian communities, in their lack of interactions usually with one another socially, and the conflict just creates all of these visions of them, each other, that are so distorted in a very painful, ugly way. And when they actually get to meet each other, and as you say, realize that each is just human with and has similar things they're interested in at times. And it's really sad that we've come to this in our societies, but really great that you provide this platform for everyone, and the American kids also learning about it. You've hosted teens a number of times, and where all did they come from? And
we have hosted, well, let's see, we've hosted one Palestinian citizen of Israel who she actually was Druze and made a decision that she didn't necessarily align with that group. She wanted to be more with the Jewish Israeli group, which was very interesting. Then we hosted a young woman from Brooklyn. We hosted a young woman who is Israeli, 2 Israelis, and 3 Palestinians. And this year we hosted 2 Palestinian young women.
Did anything surprise you about the teens that you hosted?
One of them was from a more conservative family and was exploring really her identity in the biggest way throughout this program. And we had very deep and profound talks about that. And the other one had more international experience, and had a host family in another place in the United States for a year. And so between the 2 of them, they really had sort of a difference of different experiences, but they both ended up being incredibly close with each other. And we became incredibly close, really talking about, and I'll just share with you, the power of women leaders.
Yay.
That was really, I would say, if there was a theme this summer, it was about women leaders. And they are 2 of the most amazing young women I've ever met, and both so courageous in their own way. And I think their eyes were opened, and we are still in touch, and hopefully they'll just be part of our family forever.
How cool. Having been one of the few female managers in my corporate career way back when. I was 41 before I got married, and so I had a lot of years to be in the corporate world, and then chose to stay home to have my child, and raise my child. But I love to hear it. It's unfortunate that women still are not earning what they should, et cetera, but more and more women leaders. The female perspective always just adds a different perspective, and in leadership and with organizations, you see it all the time, and it's so necessary. And so I love hearing about the next generation who will grow to improve the world. What were the teens like that you hosted?
Kids were adorable, absolutely adorable, with wonderful energy, great ideas. They did speak a little bit about what went on during the day. The dialogues are somewhat very difficult. People have opposing views, and they bring that home. One of the kids with us was a swimmer. We have a pool, and he'd wake up at 15 and he'd do laps. And our other young man was a singer, and he would sing for the group many times. I did a song with him one time when the kids were here. I played guitar, and he sang Hallelujah, which everyone just loved. And it was just delightful getting to know them, getting to know their families, and I'm hoping that we can visit them when we go to Israel.
Very cool. Yeah, I understand that does happen. Did you, I also understood that sometimes you end up interacting, or the host families end up interacting also with their parents. Did you have that?
Yes, we did. We had some Zoom calls, we had emails back and forth. They were very appreciative of us taking care of their kids, of course, and the kids and we bonded terrifically. It was a wonderful experience. Really, all around was just lovely. It's a wonderful feeling being a part of this group. There are people making lunches every day for the kids, people shuttling them around. There are so many details that have to be taken care of, and it's all done on a volunteer basis. And the program is very powerful, and you see these young kids responding, and they're very appreciative. And the day that they left after that farewell dinner, you see kids that were unknown to each other in the beginning, 3 weeks prior, hugging each other, crying in tears, going home, having had an experience which has changed them forever. And it's just wonderful to be a part of that.
I was wondering, could you describe, I had the privilege of seeing them get off the bus and everything on the first day and then seeing them on the last. Can you describe any of the changes in them between how they first acted, reacted to the ending?
So as I was alluding to, when they come in, they're tired. They've been traveling for 16 hours. They get off the bus and they're in 4 different delegations: the American delegation, Palestinian, Israeli, Palestinian, and Israeli. And they all go into their respective groups and they huddle around and they don't know each other. Shortly after the dialogues begin, there are a number of activities which are team building. And they first, before they even have dialogues, they just get to know each other and find out things about each other and tell stories and gain confidence. And once they feel that there's a free space and a space where they can feel safe, they then continue to integrate and learn more about each other and tell their stories in a focused way with facilitators. By mid portion of the program, you start to see them making friendships, getting together with each other in the nighttime. And then by the end of the program, there's this just great bonding. And it's like kids who have made friendships that will last forever. It's a beautiful thing to see. I remember the 2019 at the last farewell dinner, I went to pick up our kids and I walked into this house and there was this Arabic music blaring, and the Israeli kids and the Arabic kids were up on a table and they were doing this tribal dance that was just, it was amazing to watch and to see their camaraderie.
You see it from beginning to end, which is the biggest gift you can imagine. So they step off the bus and they're just nervous and a little bit exhausted. And
yeah, it's a long trip.
Yeah, it's a long trip. And they are sort of bewildered and cautious. And you take them into your home and they gradually open up more and more and more with one another in the program. And sometimes they really are so overwhelmed that they just need to go in their room and shut the door, or they're so angry, or they're pensive because they're things that they're starting to realize and learn that they didn't know before. And then there's something that happens where they start to tell their personal stories. Mm-hmm. And the personal stories become a turning point. And during the personal stories, they all start to realize, wow, you've been through this, I've been through this. You have this, I have this. And it changes so much of what happens in the program. And Culture Night changes so much of what happens in the program because they are each sharing parts of themselves, and they're welcomed and they're warmly welcomed, yeah, and understood. So the more that they are able to share parts of themselves, the more that they connect deeply. And then by the end of the program, there are no delegations that are separated. Yeah. They are clinging to each other and crying. Yeah. Crying, saying goodbye to their host families, crying, saying goodbye to each other. And that's the beauty of what happens in Hands of Peace. And it's very interesting to see what Hands of Peace attracts in terms of the American participants, why they're there. For the Americans, they have so many choices of what they can do with their summer. Right. And they are choosing along with the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Palestinian citizens of Israel, to go into a program that is very intense, to sit in dialogue and talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and talk about what it is to be a peace builder and talk about their challenges in life and the social injustices that are happening in the United States. It's not an easy thing to step into that dialogue room, and they, I believe, are incredibly courageous to do that kind of work. Most adults would run screaming out of that situation. But when you realize what the power of dialogue is for these youth, it really becomes something that makes you realize how important it is to have dialogue for everyone.
I totally agree, particularly with what's going on politically nowadays in the US. In talking to all these various peace organizations, I was just saying, I think we all need some courses in this, even to be able to talk to your own families.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a great organization that I've taken courses through called Essential Partners. And they have free courses you can take.
I thought it would be fun to discuss some specific programs which will include fun activities like cultural night and host family days, as well as the extremely educational trip to the Mexican border. We'll also talk about the very important host family interactions that are key to running the program and personal development for the participants as well as the families. What's cultural night?
So Culture Night is a program that, or a part of the program that's really a critical part. It's a night where the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Americans all have, they cook. So they cook for the community. They cook foods from their culture, and they do skits about their culture. And they talk about who they are and where they are. And it's very fun, but sometimes can be sort of an intense night because there are sometimes raw truths that come out in these skits that will often be fodder for dialogue the next day. And it can be a breakthrough sort of a day for these dialogue program, for the dialogue in general, because the groups sometimes will have the real courage, I'm going to use that word again, to be very honest about what their culture is going through. And it can be confronting for both the people in the audience, which are often just host families and some community members. And that can cause them to sort of raise their voices and learn from each other and also be able to talk about it in dialogue the next day. It's really a beautiful thing.
How cool.
This is part of the fun, but also the most stressful part of the whole thing. Everybody has an hour and a half to cook all their dishes. And so we do this we do this in the Greek church, and they have a big kitchen, and in the kitchen we have people in the room, chefs and helpers and choppers, and everybody's all cooking crazily, and they all dress up. The kids dress up when they do their skits, and they'll in their traditional garb. Sometimes they dance, sometimes they sing, they sometimes do really silly things.
What are hosted gatherings?
The young people have very intense days, and the hosted gatherings are basically times where they get a chance to connect just as teenagers, and they're hosted by different people in the community. So they're parties where they can go and just release and relax and not do intense things.
So that's like what Rob and Norma had at their house?
Yes.
Well, there are a number of those that occur. People volunteer their homes. We catered it with Mexican food and had music, and Don sang. But what we did was the kids are tired at the end of the day, and they've had an emotional day usually. After dialogues, it can be quite a tough thing. And here they are where they may have had emotional, changes that occurred. Some kids cry, some kids scream. And then at night, they come to your home, and they're all like, it all goes away, and they again bond and come together. And that seems to be the force, part of the glue that makes the program work so well, just having time to relax and be together.
And the host family days, that's when they spend time with the host and they take them places.
Yeah, it's just a sacred day where you just get to relax together and just get to know each other and tour around, and it's beautiful.
On the first day, we went down to the Seaport Village. We went to, I took them down to see the sea lion. We did that. And then we also took them to the glider port so they could see guys gliding around, which was a lot of fun. And just spending time together and just talking. We went out to eat a bunch of times. We went to different restaurants that they wanted to try. So we went to Japanese, we went to Italian, and we, as I mentioned, we took them to the theater at nighttime, which they just had a very rich and enriching experience. And for us, just being with them was wonderful, watching it through their eyes, the experience and what they were getting.
Yeah, sounds like I wanted to be along too. Sounds fun.
Hands of Peace community is really centered around these hosts. You know, the host parents are hosting these youth for 19 days of their lives.
Yeah.
Intimately connected, picking them up, driving them, making sure they're fed,
Yeah.
taking care of them if they're sick. You know, it's literally they become part of your family.
Yeah.
And so much of this was also the commitment of the host families, but really the experience of the host families who get to go in and be part of this and get to really see and get to know these youth, and in their own way they're learning dialogue, in their own way they're learning about conflict resolution, and they're learning about different cultures, and they're learning how to be aware of one another's feelings and put yourself in their shoes. So it's very profound for the host families as well.
We actually participated, and we hosted 2 Palestinian kids who were so moved by that dinner that we got involved. And it was one of the most wonderful experiences, bringing them into our home, learning about them, and watching. This program is much more than just about the kids and about their interactions, which is so important and wonderful to see, but it's also about the community of people who get involved and care about the program and give it an energy that is so invigorating and so wonderful to be a part of.
Yeah, it really feels like families. When I had the pleasure actually of meeting you and Norma, Rob's wife, at the farewell celebration, when I interviewed Scott Rasmussen in February, I learned, a lot about the organization, and I had heard so often about the family atmosphere, and it really touched my heart when one of the teens that was staying with you came over to Norma and needed to ask her about something, but he kissed her on her cheek, and it just felt like, his mom away from home, and it was so sweet, and really kind of says it all, as far as how close everybody gets, and the family atmosphere.
It is. It's a really beautiful thing, and I think a huge part of why the organization has been successful, and why somehow the magic always happens every year. It just happens because these host families open their hearts. The kids have this experience because they feel safe, they feel secure, they feel like they can be they're going to be taken care of.
Yeah. What's an expression workshop?
So this year, the team, the program team, which is the site directors and the regional managers, came up with a really great program idea, and that is that they were going to incorporate art and more art intensives within the program.
Oh.
So in the afternoon, they could take a music workshop, they could take a photography workshop, or a theater workshop. And then in those workshops, were 5 different workshops that they did over the course of the program, and then they performed or exhibited at the farewell celebration. So the musicians that you saw and the singing that you saw at the farewell, that was the result of the music workshop. The photography exhibition that you saw, that was the result of the photography exhibit, and the theater that you saw.
And the Excel program, is that basically second year leadership program? Is that what that is?
Exactly. It stands for Extraordinary Leader. And it is a second year leadership program. You can't talk about peace without talking about religion and faith. And that faith is a big part of many of the lives of the youth, but they don't often have the opportunity to experience other religions in their communities. So we go to a mosque, we go to a church, and we go to a synagogue. And we have Q&A with a rabbi, an imam, and a pastor, or whoever is in the Christian church, and it's a very profound experience for them.
When the kids go to a synagogue and a church and a mosque while they're here, were you able to attend any of those activities?
All of them. Every service is eye-opening. It really is. If you can imagine what it's like for these youth who, most of them have not been to other services, like a Jewish participant hasn't been to a mosque, and a Muslim participant very often has not been to a synagogue. And for them to be able to be welcomed into these beautiful faith communities, I think is very eye-opening for all of us. And as host families, we also get to go to these services, and it's very, very interesting and eye-opening to experience that.
In your summer camp activities, did you attend any of the interfaith activities?
I did. I went to a mosque, I went to the synagogue, I went to the church, and I found that enlightening as well.
What was that like? I know the kids often speak when they go there, but what kind of happenings?
For instance, at the synagogue, the rabbi there, Rabbi Bohm, was just so interesting. At the end of the service, which was kind of geared for the kids, she had a question and answer period, and kids could ask questions about the conflict and about religion and about how it affected her. And they were just very, very beautiful, beautiful interactions, and her responses were wonderful.
Given the importance of interfaith in the teens' interactions and activities, we spoke to Pastor Greg Bostrom of Christ Presbyterian Church in Carlsbad, who has hosted the youth from Hands of Peace at their church. Pastor Greg arrived at Christ Presbyterian Church in December 2014 after serving Wildwood Presbyterian Church in Grays Lake, Illinois for 23 years as co-pastor with his wife, Kathy. Greg grew up in the Midwest, attending high school in Wheaton, Illinois. He is a graduate of the University of Illinois in economics, Princeton Seminary in New Jersey, and McCormick Seminary in Chicago, where he received his Doctor of Ministry degree in 1998. Pastor Greg, how did Christ Presbyterian Church get involved with Hands of Peace?
Actually, I heard about Hands of Peace in Chicago because the church that I served there with my wife, who was my co-pastor then, one of our members became the site director in the summer of 2014 for Hands of Peace, this unique and incredibly interesting organization that I hadn't heard of. But when she became the site manager, we of course learned all about it, and at that point, I was just about to come to Carlsbad, and knew that there was a new site for Hands of Peace that had begun in San Diego. So when we arrived here, I wondered, well, where is this? Where is it in San Diego? And to my surprise and delight, found out it's actually Carlsbad. And not only that, but people in the church that I had just arrived to serve were already hosting young people from Israel, Palestine to be part of Hands of Peace, and had done so the summer before I arrived. So it was this rather remarkable coincidence of circumstances that I already knew what Hands of Peace was and was already very interested in it, and then walked right into a place that was already part of it. So I take no credit for the church being interested in Hands of Peace. People here were already very much supportive of the whole idea and jumping in the initial stages, the very beginnings of Hands of Peace here.
So the church then must have been helping them since 2013. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, right. There were people on it that started right at the very beginning. So
wonderful. So what types of activities does your church do with Hands of Peace?
Well, in addition to encouraging individuals to serve as volunteers and host families and such, and a number of folks in our congregation have done that and had wonderful experiences and have great stories to tell about that. Fairly early, we were asked if we would just host the Sunday morning service of the Christian faith, because you know, the young people get an exposure to all the three monotheistic faiths, the three Abrahamic faiths, and would we host it? And of course, yes, we would be honored to host. And so we had that first Sunday morning where young people from Israel, Palestine, and the United States came, and they shared their experiences, and it was a wonderful experience for our church family. And so every time they ask, we say yes, of course, we'll be honored to host.
How would you describe the speeches that you've heard at your church?
Well, they're personal stories to bring some of the experiences that these young people have had, and the things they've seen and the things they've been told, and then to have them in this environment where they're hearing all kinds of different approaches, different perspectives, and how do you hold on to what you've been given and yet honor what others are now presenting to you, and to hear them wrestling with that, and many times, in many occasions, wrestling with that experience of trying to put these very powerful experiences, their own and then someone else's, that they realize is also valid, to put that together and to talk about it is very brave. I always learn something, and not just learning with the mind, but learning with the heart, and it's a great experience, Penny, of giving you hope.
One of the very special projects that the teens undertake is a visit to the Mexican and United States border. It's a matchless visit, as they were taken to Borderfield State Park in Chicano Park. The Israeli, Palestinian, and American teens were met there also by 15 Mexican students from the Center for Technical and Higher Education, or CETYS, in Tijuana, and a University of San Diego professor, Alberto Pulido, vice chairperson of the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center.
We do the border visit every year. It was started by Scott Silk, who is the former site director and also a teacher at Pacific Ridge School. And he was the founding site director in San Diego. And Scott had the idea that borders are such a huge issue in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and they are also a huge issue here in the United States, and that we have a border 40 minutes away from here.
Right.
And so the border visit going down to Friendship Park is incredibly profound for these Israelis and Palestinians, and particularly the Palestinians, who the borders are such in their face all the time. And for them to be able to see the border at Friendship Park, and then to also speak to other Mexican students about what it's like for their border and their border situation, it is a very profound experience. And it's profound for the Americans too. Many of the Americans have never been down there before. So you go down to that border and you see the chain link fence that just is between the families on one side and the other. It really opens your eyes.
So there's actually families on either side of the border that have to go back and forth.
Have you ever been to Friendship Park?
I don't know that I have.
You would remember if you went to Friendship Park before.
Yeah, okay, so
So
I guess I
Friendship Park
haven't.
is a park that's in Borderfield State Park, and it is a really beautiful place right on the ocean. And the border, you can see the wall is right there. And this, for many, many years, has been the only place that families that are on both sides of the borders can actually meet. So there is like a very small section of chain link fence where they can, touch fingers through the chain link fence. Families that are on the other side of the border and cannot cross, and that is where we conduct this event. And there are, it's very interesting because you're right on the ocean. There's a wall that goes right out into the ocean, and then there's this park that's sort of a gathering spot, with some coverings and picnic areas and that kind of thing. And then on the other side is what used to be a bull ring. That's where the program takes place with the dialogue with the Mexican students.
Oh.
So we have a dialogue where we talk about borders in a circle, with different groups, different dialogue groups, and we talk about borders with the Mexican students. And this year we went to Borderfield State Park, did our dialogue there, and then went to Chicano Park and had a session with a professor. From USD and from UCSD to talk about Chicano Park and to talk about their borders. What the essence of that cultural border is in at Chicano Park.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the differences. Chicano Park is what?
An area that is beautiful. It's an area where it's underneath an underpass in close to Coronado that is murals from all these different Mexican artists or Mexican American artists who live in the Chicano Park area of Logan Heights. And it would be called art activism. These murals cover the walls underneath this underpass. They're all over the place. Many of them have very profound themes about history, about the stories that have happened in Logan Heights and in that area. And there truly are borders in Logan Heights that have really changed the community. And that was when the highway went through their community, it changed everything in their community. And I had not learned all of this until I went this time and heard from that professor. I've been to Chicano Park, which is a beautiful experience. If you're interested in art and activism, you should absolutely go. And I think that he does regular tours. But it was a really eye-opening for the young people to see that as well.
But this time what was unique was, as they were there, the kids advised us that there was someone, they were right at the wall, and there was a woman who was trying to swim around the wall in the river. And as she came on land, she was met by the immigration people and arrested.
Oy.
So they were sitting there watching that. It was almost like they couldn't believe it. Like, do they do this every Thursday?
But what you're saying, I just love this program. This is so cool. I know during obviously the years that because of COVID, you weren't able to meet, but you met online. And when you were meeting online, were you essentially doing the camp online, or how was it different?
In 2021, we had our first ever summer program launchpad. And this was an online program that took place over a number of weeks where we did practice dialogues. And we talked with them about different skills and skill sets that they would need going into the summer program. And so many of those youth that participated in the summer program launchpad were hands, first year hands in the 2022 summer program. And the hope is that we will have some form of that launch pad every year so that we can be preparing the next generation of participants to know how to be when they join together in person.
I'd like to know, what are these parents like who are willing to send their kids to the US essentially so they'll have a better life ultimately? Do you ever get to speak to any of these parents?
Well, as a host parent, you always have some kind of connection.
And what are they like? Because it seems the kids are courageous, the parents have to be courageous. I mean,
the parents are incredibly courageous. They really are. And I do think that there are many different ways that this happens, where the young person becomes involved with Hands of Peace and decides that they want to come and be part of this program. One is that it is driven by this young person who says, I want to do this. I want to go to the US. And there's a lot of work that has to be done on the side of the Hands of Peace program to make sure that they realize that the parents realize that these young people are going to be safe, that we have so many different safety measures in place, that we have chaperones for the youth that are there from the beginning to end of the program. And those chaperones are there for them in every way, that the host families go through background checks and are vetted. And the host family vetting is pretty intense. You go and you do a site visit at their house and make sure that they have a good place where they'll have some space and can process on their own rather than being in a big group setting. So yes, it's a leap of faith for the parents to allow these young people to come across the world, across the pond, and come and stay with a host family. And so, yeah, I think it's a very courageous thing.
Yeah. I mean, but we're not talking like our kids in the US and they're going somewhere, I don't know, say France. And okay, these are war zones. These are, between the Israelis and the Palestinians, too often, like the last few days, there's missiles and there's, dangers. And now they're sending their kids here to interact with one another. That to me is like mind blowing, as a parent. And I don't know that I would have the courage. And so I'm just fascinated by who these folks are, and you always hear of the parents, I don't know, like during the Holocaust and sending their kids away to protect them. It's so moving to me, and that how parents want their kids to have a better life. And it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Hands of Peace does a lot of work to help parents to feel safe around this process. And we have a Middle East staff that's really amazing. They are the ones who are out there talking about the program, and they instill a basis of trust and let them know that there are security measures in place and safety measures in place. But I have to say, if we keep doing things the same way over and over again, we're not going to make a change.
Absolutely.
And the only way that we can make a change in our world, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is to get out of our comfort zones and to really decide that we're going to do something. And Hands of Peace is doing something.
Yeah.
And these young people, all these young people who come, the 70 young people that we had come this summer, they are the most courageous youth The world has changed. It has been a very difficult time through the pandemic and other things. And for them to decide that they were going to come in the middle of still COVID and take the leap to come and stay in Chicago and in San Diego, I can't tell you how grateful I am. And I feel like it takes an entire courageous community to make this happen.
What happened in May 2021? Did that impact your program?
Yes, of course. Every time there's violence, it impacts our program. We just put out a statement. Hands of Peace just put out a statement. This was it yesterday or the day before about the violence that took place in Gaza. And essentially our statement is always that we stand behind our alumni, that we exist because we're here to help our alumni raise their voices, and that we are there to support them in any way possible to help them raise their voices and to be leaders of change.
Have you heard from any of the kids that stayed with you
Yes.
recently?
Yes.
Yeah. Were they impacted by, I mean, of course they were impacted in general, but anything personally?
Not personally, but I think that anytime there's violence in a situation like that, that it is so hard and so disheartening, and that any violence like that really does not serve. And so we stand up for nonviolence in every step of the way. And that's the conversation that I had with one of my young host daughters, actually.
You also, as an organization, give some scholarships out to some participants who demonstrate a need and dedication to Hands of Peace values.
We are a group that instills learning, instills the concept of peace, and moving towards dialogue as opposed to resistance and opposition. But we want to foster and help people who are in need to continue their education.
Kim Landy will discuss the reimagining program that she led to lead Hands of Peace into their future development.
It was a huge project that took a better part of a year. And it was a plan that we were going to go through a reimagining process to really look at several different aspects of the organization. And it was a response to the fact that when Hands of Peace was founded after 9/11, that we had certain principles in mind of what the organization was. And at that time, it was much more focused on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the program over the years evolved, of course, but we were so busy just trying to have a program that we didn't have a chance to really step back and look strategically at how we were serving our alumni, and heard that from our alumni and from our staff. And there was a real need for us to step back and listen, that we were going to go through a reimagining process to really look at several different aspects of the organization. Found that the alumni really wanted to have the skills to be able to be activists in their community around anything that they felt passionate about beyond the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It could be the environment, it could be social justice, it could be women's rights. They felt like that Hands of Peace dialogue program was a starting point for them to be able to be activists in their community in any way. That was one of the big profound shifts for Hands of Peace. The other thing that we found is that the alumni wanted these skills that they wanted from after the program were around things that would give them the skills to be able to grow and rise as leaders in their communities, wherever they are. And we developed a model called Dialogue, Education, Action. So dialogue is first, and that is the summer program. So 2 years of the summer program are all focused on dialogue. After that second year, of the summer program, from 2 to 5 years, we're really focusing on education, skill building around how to be a peace builder in your community. And the third part is action, and that is how to be an activist, what they can do to really grow their knowledge in their communities to have real change. And so that's what the essence of the program is now, because of that program.
Wonderful talking to you, and I'm looking forward.
Thank you so much.
Next week, we'll broadcast our interviews with Hands of Peace Part 2. It's a compilation of interviews with first-year hands from summer 2022. You've heard that Hands of Peace impacts those who attend. We're going to hear from them, and for now, may you all live in peace, shalom, and salam.